So our next person, our next storyteller, is Countess Winfrey.
So, I've been living in Dayton, Ohio for the last 12 years, but truly, I'm a Southern girl through and through. I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, but most of my memories reside in Memphis, Tennessee. My father was from Memphis, and every year, at least 2 to 3 times a year, he would make us take that 3-hour road trip down from Nashville to Memphis to visit with my grandmother. And I used to love taking that trip because I used to see all these beautiful trees, gorgeous lakes, and if we left in the evening time, I got to experience the most beautiful sunset, in between my naps, of course. So when we would get to Memphis, we would turn right onto Hunter Avenue, and we'd arrive at my grandmother's house. And she had the largest yard on the street, this beautiful big yard, beautiful cut grass, because she made sure her grass stayed cut, okay? She had these mile-high trees in her yard, this beautiful, cute little garden in her backyard, a little outhouse, and then the main home was this L-shaped shotgun house that was bought in 1950 by her and my grandfather. And what made that house feel so special was the beautiful, vibrant red brick. There was this green trim on the outside, and there was a green door to match, because you had to match back then, and everything had to be right tip top. So my brother and I used to love running out of the car and trying to be the first one to ring her doorbell. Now, her doorbell was as loud as a fire alarm. You heard that thing from the front of the house. And my grandmother was 69 when I was born, so she wasn't ever the fastest mover. She was vibrant and she was vivacious, but not very fast. So oftentimes we'd ring the doorbell, we'd ring, 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 and then she would say, "I'm coming." And usually maybe a couple seconds later, maybe about 30 seconds later, she'd open the door and she'd be like, "Hey!" And she'd have this huge chuckle and this huge smile on her face, and she would greet us with this beautiful warm hug. And usually, 9 times out of 10, if we were lucky enough, she had that food ready on the table for us when we arrived at her house. And spending time at my grandmother's house was such a treasured memory. I got to spend a lot of time with my cousins and family friends, and I'm sure we've all had those memories as children, and they stick with you forever. So later on, when I grew up, it was time to go to college, I attended the University of Memphis. And I didn't attend University of Memphis because I had family in town. They just happened to also be there. But I went there because I got the most scholarship dollars and essentially ended up having the best opportunity to learn and grow at the University of Memphis. I didn't think that my grandmother living in the same city was gonna have the impact that it did, but what it did for me was I got to spend so much more time with her, and by this time she was in her 90s. So we didn't really know how much longer she was gonna live, but I really appreciated being able to spend more time with her. And every Sunday she would cook dinner, and even on the days where I didn't quite make it to church, maybe I slept in because I was still in college, she would always have a seat at the table ready for me. And if I didn't make it to dinner on time, which sometimes I didn't, she'd pack me up a plate, I'd go by there, pick it up, and then I had food for at least a couple of days after that. And that was something that she really loved to do. She loved to cook for her family. She loved to cook for us. And I remember when I graduated college, I was about to move to Dayton. And I stayed in Memphis for about 4.5 years. In the last 2 months that I lived there, I stayed with my grandmother. And I thought to myself, she's 91. Who's gonna make hot water cornbread when she's gone? So I said, okay, it's on me. It's on me. I gotta learn how to make this hot water cornbread. So I would sit across from her at her bar, and she would sit at her stove, and she would start making hot water cornbread, and I wrote down every single part of her process. So she would take the boiling water, she'd place it on the back of the stove. She had a green bowl that she would place in cornmeal and flour and sugar, and she'd stir it up to make sure all the ingredients got spread around. And once that water was done boiling, she'd pour it right into the bowl and stir it to make sure it got to just the right consistency. And while she was, making sure that consistency was getting good, she would have her cast iron skillet on the stove. She would have her vegetable oil in there, and it'd be getting nice and warm. And so she'd put on her plastic gloves. She'd take scoops out of that mixture. She'd make the patties. She'd place them on a plate first, because she was a very orderly woman. She wasn't doing nothing out of order, okay? And then right when that oil was good and hot, she would drop that hot water cornbread in there, and it would just start smelling up the kitchen in such a beautiful way. She would then take a fork, not a spatula, but a fork. and she would flip those patties over and it would just expose this beautiful brown crust and this like soft inside. And I used to be like, oh, I can't wait till it's done. And she would wait until dinner was almost done to make this hot water cornbread, because it's really best experienced right out of that skillet. So when I first moved to Dayton, that was something that I continued to do. I would make hot water cornbread every time I missed being in the South, every time I missed being with my grandmother. And obviously getting back to Memphis from Dayton is a little bit more of a trek than getting there from Nashville. So my trips became fewer and fewer, but I did try to make sure that every birthday, every holiday, I'd made some attempt to try to get to see her, because we didn't know how many more holidays and birthdays we'd have with her. In 2020, she turned 100, which was really a beautiful celebration, and we were in COVID at the same time, so we did your classic drive-through birthday party at her neighborhood church, and she had a good time. She was a party girl. She was gonna let you know her age. Everywhere she went, you knew exactly what her age was, and she wore it with so much pride, and we had so much pride in her as well. And I remember that particular Christmas, 2020, I didn't get to go home. I was like, man, I'm not gonna be able to make it down. It also was a little dangerous. My grandmother was in her hundreds, and it just didn't make sense for me to go. So I said, well, what can I make to make me feel like I'm at home? And I was like, Grandma, I wanna make your sweet potato pie. And so now my grandmother was not afraid of evolution. She had an iPhone, and she knew how to FaceTime. And so I called her on FaceTime, and she walked me through the entire process of making this sweet potato pie. She even told me where I did wrong. She was like, I see some brown spots on there. Now, mind you, she already had only one good eye. So she's looking at me through the screen with one good eye. The other eye is a little glossy. But she was very much about the book and very much wanted me to have that experience. And it felt like not only an opportunity for me to learn how to make sweet potato pie from scratch, but also an opportunity for me to spend more time with her, for her to give me a little bit more of what she had. That way, when she left, I had something to remember her by. My grandmother lived until 2023. She died on July 6th. And my entire family gathered, and we, celebrated her life. And honestly, it was sad, but we were so grateful, because we kind of started to feel like we're still in time with her. I mean, she was well in her right mind up until a week before she passed, and she said she was going to be ready to go if she was not in her right mind. And we got to experience a very full, very vibrant woman who loved her family well, who loved people well, and everybody who met her had their own relationship with her. So she definitely let us feel a lot of pride in being Winfreys. She was a good Winfrey. So a couple days after her funeral, my dad called me, and he said that there had been a big storm, and one of the mile-high trees in the yard fell. And it was pretty amazing in some ways to see, because it fell at the root. So imagine a super tall tree, and the break in the tree is at the bottom of the tree. That doesn't happen very often. And in some way, and the tree fell away from the house, which was great. And in some ways, it felt divine, in the sense that it felt like the land knew that we had lost our matriarch. And when my dad told me this story, he said that when my grandfather passed, one of the trees in the yard fell a couple of days later after that as well. So this home has always felt like it holds so many memories, so much legacy. And every time I go back to Memphis, I try to make sure that I see the home. It looks a little bit different now. The grass is pretty tall, and the garden is full of weeds. It's not as pretty as it used to be. The outhouse has wood falling off the back of it. And unfortunately, that vibrant red brick is just a little bit more dull now. That green trim is not as clear. And that green door is just a pale green door now. It's still there, but it's pale. And the windows are boarded up. And unfortunately, it's been broken into. There's been a lot of things that have happened in the house. And even though the house is ghosted now, I feel like I still see her standing outside waving as we walk away, headed back to our, independent destinations. And I used to think that her home was the legacy. Like that was the anchor for us. That was the place where we gathered and we shared and we had these beautiful memories. And now I feel like her memories are left with us, and her legacy is in us, and my cousins, and my brother, and my siblings, and my dad, and my uncle, my aunt. And it just feels really great to be able to see her still, even though she's no longer with us. So Thank you for letting me share her story with you today. And if you're interested, during our intermission, I've brought some hot water cornbread so that you have an opportunity to have a little bit of her legacy as well. Thank you.